It was a golden afternoon in downtown Seattle, sunlight spilling through glass towers that glittered like wealth itself. Inside the top floor of the prestigious Serene Heights Hotel, silence fell the moment she walked in. Everyone knew that silence was safer than words when Celeste Armand, the youngest self-made female billionaire in the state, entered a room. Her sharp heels clicked like a metronome of authority, her gaze cold and unreadable behind tinted glasses. Every staff member in sight stiffened, lowered their eyes, and prayed not to be noticed. Celeste was beautiful, powerful, and feared, not because she raised her voice, but because she didn't have to. One look was enough to reduce a manager to stammering apologies. They said she was heartless. They said she had fired a chef for serving her coffee 2 degrees colder than she liked. They said she hadn't smiled in years. And perhaps all of it was true, or at least that's what everyone believed. But that day something changed. Because that afternoon, when Celeste walked into the hotel restaurant expecting her usual seat by the window, she found it occupied. A man sat there, calm, composed, unmoving. Beside him was a little girl with a notebook full of colored drawings and a small juice box sweating against the tablecloth. Celeste's assistant immediately rushed ahead to clear the table, whispering frantically, "Mom, I'll have him moved." But before the assistant could take another step, the man looked up. His eyes weren't afraid. He didn't flinch. He simply said, in a quiet voice that carried the calm of someone who'd seen too much hardship to be shaken by wealth, "Will be done in 5 minutes." And for the first time in years, Celeste Armand didn't know what to say. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of change, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel, Kindness Journal, where every story reminds us that hearts can heal and people can grow. The man's name was Noah Vance, a single father who worked as a maintenance technician in the same hotel. He wasn't rich, but he carried himself with quiet dignity, the kind that doesn't come from status but from survival. His daughter, Mara, was 7 years old, full of questions and drawings and hope. Noah had promised her a small celebration that day for getting the highest grade in her class, even if it meant spending half of his week's pay on 1 glass of orange juice and a shared dessert at the fancy restaurant he worked beneath. He didn't know that he had accidentally chosen the billionaire's reserved table. Celeste's assistant kept motioning for security, but something about Noah's calmness made her stop. Celeste stood there, arms crossed, looking at the man and the child. Her face gave away nothing, but deep inside, a faint memory stirred, a memory she had buried years ago. Once, long before she built her empire, before her name became a symbol of success and fear, she too had been a little girl waiting for her father in a diner. She remembered the sound of a rainstorm outside, the warmth of his hand holding hers, and the promise he never got to keep. Her father had died of a heart attack the very next week, leaving Celeste and her mother drowning in debt and loneliness. The world had been cruel, and she had learned to become crueler, to survive. Now, watching Noah talk to his daughter with patience and love, Celeste felt something crack deep within her walls. She didn't like it. She turned sharply to leave, snapping at her assistant to find another table. But as she walked away, she heard Mara's soft laughter, pure, genuine, untouched by the bitterness that stained Celeste's world. That laughter followed her like a haunting melody. Over the next few days, Celeste noticed the man again. In the lobby, fixing a light fixture. In the hallway, polishing marble tiles. He never looked up when she passed by, never flattered her like everyone else did, never tried to be noticed. He just worked quietly, with precision and pride. Once she even saw him give his lunch sandwich to an elderly janitor who had forgotten his own. Noah didn't know anyone was watching, but Celeste couldn't look away. Something inside her began to shift. She started arriving at the hotel earlier, sitting by the same window where he and Mara had once been. She told herself it was coincidence, but it wasn't. The seat that had once been the symbol of her control now felt like a reminder of what she had lost. Human warmth. One morning she overheard 2 waitresses whispering. They said Noah might lose his job. His daughter had been sick, and he'd missed a shift without notice. The manager, tired of making exceptions, planned to replace him. Celeste felt the familiar impulse to ignore it. Business was business. People were replaceable. But the thought of that little girl, waiting for her father to come home with stories instead of exhaustion, hit her like lightning. The next day, she called a meeting. Every executive in the room tensed, expecting a reprimand. But Celeste surprised them. She ordered that all staff leave early that afternoon for a hotel-wide gratitude lunch. She even joined them in the dining hall, something she hadn't done in years. When she walked in, conversation died instantly. Every head bowed, but she ignored the stiffness and went straight to Noah's table. He looked up, confused, as Celeste set her tray down opposite his. "You're Noah Vance, right?" she said quietly. He nodded, cautious but polite. "Yes, Mum. I heard about your daughter. How is she?" "She's better," he replied slowly. "Thank you for asking." For a long moment, Celeste said nothing. Her perfectly manicured hand brushed against the table's edge, as if grounding herself in something real. "You were sitting here the other day," she said. "My table." Noah hesitated. "I didn't mean any disrespect. It was just the only open seat in Mara." Celeste stopped him with a faint shake of her head. "You don't have to explain. You reminded me of someone I used to know." Then she did something no one in that room had ever seen her do. She smiled. It wasn't a polite, cold smile. It was small, trembling, uncertain, but real. And when she looked at Noah, there was no trace of superiority. Just quiet gratitude. From that day on, things began to change, not just for her, but for everyone. Celeste started visiting the staff cafeteria instead of her private suite. She ordered coffee like everyone else. She asked people's names and remembered them. At first, the employees thought it was an act, some corporate image strategy. But when she arranged a medical fund for employees' families and personally attended Mara's school art show, people began to see something deeper. She was trying to heal. No one noticed the change but never commented on it. Instead, he kept showing up with quiet consistency. He didn't flatter her or seek favor. But sometimes they talked about life, about loss, about the small, fragile things that mattered. In those quiet conversations, Celeste found something she had forgotten existed: peace. One afternoon, Celeste visited the park near the hotel and saw Mara feeding ducks by the pond. She joined them on the bench, hesitant at first. "You like drawing?" she asked gently. Mara nodded and showed her sketchbook. Among the drawings was a picture of 3 people, a man, a little girl, and a woman with long hair sitting by a table. "That's you," Mara said proudly. "Dade says you're the lady who smiles like sunshine but tries to hide it." Celeste laughed softly, her throat tightening. "He said that, did he?" Mara nodded again, completely unaware of the tears welling in Celeste's eyes. That night, when Celeste returned to her penthouse overlooking the city, she sat by the window and thought about how empty success had felt before she met a man who refused to bow to her name and a little girl who saw her as human, not powerful. Weeks passed. Celeste began donating quietly to schools and shelters, always under Mara's name. She stopped firing people for small mistakes. The media noticed the change, but they didn't understand it. They called it rebranding. But Noah knew it wasn't rebranding, it was rebirth. Then came the day everything came full circle. A major business partner threatened to pull out of a deal worth millions. Celeste's board urged her to fight ruthlessly as she always had. Instead, she made a different choice. She went to the meeting alone, apologized for her past harshness, and offered fair terms that benefited both sides. It shocked everyone, but it saved the deal. Later, when she stepped out into the hotel lobby, the staff clapped for her, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. As the applause faded, she saw Noah standing near the door, his daughter asleep in his arms after waiting to show her another drawing. Celeste walked over quietly, brushed a strand of hair from Mara's forehead, and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me what being human feels like." Noah smiled gently. "Wish we all just need someone to believe in us again." And in that golden afternoon light, Celeste finally understood that kindness wasn't weakness, it was strength in its purest form.